Happy Global Wellness Day from Italy. I have the pleasure of being here today at the Davines Village with Professor Sgoifo. He's a neuroscientist, a neurobiologist, a great expert of stress and mental wellness. So I couldn't have been in a better company today to celebrate Global Wellness Day. And Andrea, welcome.
Hi, Barbara, and hello to the Global Wellness Day community around the world.
It's a pleasure. And, you know, let's start from a basic question. What is mental wellness?
Well, according to the World Health Organization, mental wellness is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his own abilities. He can cope with the normal stressors of daily life. He can work productively, and he is able to make a contribution to his community. And this means that mental wellness is a positive state, a state that goes far beyond the absence of mental illness. So you're able to think, to feel, and act in ways that create a positive impact on your physical and social well-being. And mentally well people are positive and self-assured, and they are in control of their thoughts, of their emotions, and their behavior. This enables them to handle challenges, to build strong relationships, and to enjoy life.
So mental wellness is about enjoying life, being able to cope with difficulties. But actually, what happens at a neurobiological standpoint, meaning what happens in the body, really?
Well, a strong indication that we got from the last years of research in the field of neuroscience is that the potentiation of parasympathetic modulation can be extremely beneficial for stress resilience and mental wellness. Let me explain a bit this point.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the parasympathetic system is one of the two branches of the autonomic nervous system, which modulates the activity of many organs of the body.
What happens actually?
Well, usually the sympathetic branch activates our body. For instance, it stimulates the release of adrenaline and noradrenaline, it increases heart rate and energy mobilization, and basically the sympathetic system underlies the fight or flight response to any environmental challenge. On the other side, the intervention of the parasympathetic system allows rest and relaxation, because it decreases heart rate and respiratory rate, and basically it underlies the so-called rest and digest phase. So the role of the parasympathetic nervous system is extremely important, as it is a major bidirectional communication pathway between the brain and the body. So for instance, there are given fibers of the parasympathetic nervous system that carry information from body periphery to the brain, and they carry information about changes, for example, in immune function. For example, those changes that are induced by the aggression of pathogens, like viruses and bacteria.
Like COVID-19, I guess.
Also, yes, like COVID-19 too. And this afferent signal stimulates a neuroendocrine axis, the so-called hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical axis, that the one that releases cortisol to make
it's easier for us to understand it, I guess.
And this axis in turn triggers a generalized physiological and psychological stress response. So once in the brain, this signal propagates also to other regions involved in physiological, cognitive, and emotional regulation, regions like the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, for example.
So you spoke about COVID-19, inflammation, and this difficult state, but this, from what you're explaining us, happens also if we're not sick, but we live in a very stressful time. So this could, have an impact also on people that just, live the anxiety that has characterized our recent years, right?
That is absolutely true. During the COVID-19 pandemic, people have been exposed to a variety of different psychosocial stressors. And these stressors might induce a similar outcome, even in those of us that have not been infected directly with COVID-19. Actually, similar to viral infections, psychosocial stressors, for example, social isolation, social rejection, as we witnessed during lockdown, they upregulate inflammation, which in turn leads to aberrant mind-body interactions that might negatively impact mental health. So, as a consequence, researchers have hypothesized that we may witness a sort of wave of people developing mental health issues in the near future, and this is caused by both viral infection and high levels of psychosocial stress.
So really, mental wellness is about physical and emotional state, and we have to take care of both, right? But how can we understand, you know, I'm sure we're familiar with this sense of anxiety, but how can we understand if, you know, we're in a very dangerous situation, meaning that we're not able to actually cope with them? I mean, are there special signs or examinations that we can take?
Yeah, well, you know, there is recent evidence from the United Kingdom that shows that 1 out of 5 COVID patients present an altered mental state, such as psychosis, affective disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, especially when they are older, when they are females, and when they have low social support. But we need to keep in mind that many people, even when they were not infected at all, they have been repeatedly exposed to a variety of psychosocial stresses, interpersonal ones, work ones, financial ones. And also loneliness and sustained social exclusion have been inevitable consequences of precautions like lockdowns that were designed to slow down COVID-19 spread. So as I mentioned before, psychological discomfort activates the immune system, and such activation might be a serious threat for mental and physical health when psychosocial stressors are long-lasting. Therefore, we should expect a serious prevalence of reduced mental wellness among infected and psychosocially stressed people. And as a matter of fact, the SARS epidemic that took place in 2003 left serious mental outcomes for years afterwards.
As scientists, what kind of studies do you carry out to understand deeper and deeper this, I would say, the consequences, but also how you can measure the positive mental state?
Yeah, well, as doctors, as neuroscientists, actually we have a very powerful tool that is measuring heart rate variability. It means that by a proper analysis of the electrocardiogram, which means a very simple, non-invasive procedure, as a matter of fact, we can quantify parasympathetic activity, the one that travels from the brain to the body. And according to a very large body of scientific studies, the ability to maintain high heart rate variability in face of stressors is considered a flexible, very powerful adaptive response.
So, Andrea, how can science and medical studies help people who have gone through traumas, and how can we foster our resilience?
Well, first, let me share the medical practices, and then I will also share what everyone can do by himself. Traditional mental health interventions do reduce health-threatening inflammation, but they are estimated to alleviate less than 50% of overall psychiatric burden, especially when it comes to anxiety and depression. A very innovative and effective technique has been broadly applied in the last years, especially on post-traumatic stress disorder patients, the EMDR-based psychotherapy, where EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Experimental data show that this technique has promising ability of increasing parasympathetic nervous system activity and reducing cortisol elevations. Then in a parallel project, we will also apply this therapy to doctors of the Parma hospital that have been involved in a frontline medical assistance.
Very difficult job.
To COVID patients in the intensive care units. And also there is a technique that is called Transcutaneous Vagal nerve stimulation. It's another interesting option in this regard. It uses devices that are applied to the neck area. And this means that we can target the cervical branch of the vagus nerve, whose fibers terminate in a number of brain regions that do control stress responsivity. These devices are small, cheap, mobile, safe, and with no side effects, basically.
And they stimulate the vagus?
The vagus nerve, and so for the parasympathetic nervous system that we mentioned before. As we verified via magnetic resonance imaging, this technique induces long-lasting anti-inflammatory effects. And it also increases heart rate variability and seems to modulate serotonin and noradrenaline release. This way, ameliorating depressive and anxiety symptoms, and also sleep conditions and cognitive functions.
A very interesting side of Global Wellness Day is really to share education, so to share advanced science studies as the ones that you're telling us. But there's also a very interesting aspect that Gavazzoli is very, is very happy to share with all the Global Wellness community, which is to give advice that everyone can embrace. So I'd love to close our conversation with some practices that you can recommend to all of us, and I know that you're also expert of this, so share a little bit more.
Well, of course, lifestyle interventions are key and can have both preventive and therapeutic effects. Regular physical exercise, for example. Exercise of moderate intensity increases vagal tone, while sedentary lifestyle is associated with autonomic imbalance. So initially, exercise triggers an acute inflammation response, but also a robust cortisol secretion. And this hormonal response that goes together allows energy mobilization, but as I stated before, it also has beneficial anti-inflammatory effects. And this helps inhibiting the exercise-induced inflammation in the skeletal muscles. There are many studies showing that daily exercise protects against chronic inflammation. For example, moderate exercise for 6 weeks decreases the levels of cytokines and improves mental health, for example, by reducing depressive symptoms.
So physical exercise and practices like yoga can really help, and you have studies that prove it. So I think the spa community knows this, but hearing a scientist recommending it from a scientific standpoint only reinforces it even more. So it's very good news.
Yeah, yoga practice, including posture, slow breathing, meditation, all this improves vagal nerve function and lowers cortisol levels and decreases inflammation and promotes adaptive changes in brain regions that are involved in cognitive and affective regulation. So this explains why such interventions has a positive effect on emotional well-being and stress resilience. And basically all these considerations also apply to a mindfulness practice.
Of course, which is the new way, but it's also a very ancient one of being really conscious about what we do and take time for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And, we had the pleasure of working together for Comfort Zone for also a better understanding of how daily skincare practices, aromatherapy can really have an effect. Can you share this, since this applies to the spa world as well, to the wellness world?
Oh yeah, we have very promising evidence on the impact of aromatherapy cosmetic routines. In a recent study that we performed in collaboration with the Davines Comfort Zone industry, we showed that a single mindful face application of a cream enriched with essential oils produced a transitory potentiation of parasympathetic modulation. And when self-administration of this cream was prolonged over time, for example, twice daily for 1 month, it prevented the cortisol rise that usually is produced by a laboratory stressor. It also reduced state anxiety. It favored positive changes in mood profile and reduced those behavioral patterns that usually signal anxiety, motivational conflict, and social avoidance. So overall, this study showed that the self-administration of a cosmetic cream enriched with essential oil should be considered seriously as a valuable complementary strategy for stress resilience and for mental wellness.
It's very good to hear, and I really want to thank you because you've been able to share with us very important advanced studies, but also help us finding hope and small gestures in our everyday life to reach this mental wellness. And so once again, thank you, Professor Sgoifo.
Thanks to you.
And happy Global Wellness Day to everyone from Italy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.